All right, guys. Well, welcome. We're very just honored and glad that you guys have decided to join us for this little webinar that we're going to do today. So as you can see, there's going to be two hosts today. So myself, Rachael Vigart, and
Cameron Walker.
So we're just excited to be able to do this with you, just because we know that there's just a lot going on within us, and sometimes it's great just have an opportunity to hopefully navigate healthier ways of managing our emotions and managing our stresses and all the stuff that comes along with it. So without further ado, Cameron, would you like to open us up with our little story?
Yes, I want to read for you a little parable that is from one of my favorite authors, and it's really meant a lot to me over the years, and it's called The Keeper of the Stream. There once was a town high in the Alps that straddled the banks of a beautiful stream. The stream was fed by springs that were old as the earth and deep as the sea. The water was clear like crystal. Children laughed and played beside it. Swans and geese swam on it. You could see the rocks and the sand and the rainbow trout that swarmed at the bottom of the stream. High in the hills, far beyond anyone's sight, lived an old man who served as keeper of the springs. He had been hired so long ago that no one could remember a time when he wasn't there. He would travel from one spring to another in the hills, removing branches or fallen leaves or debris that might pollute the water, but his work was unseen. One year, the town council decided they had better things to do with their money. No one supervised the old man anyway. They had roads to repair and taxes to collect and services to offer. And giving money to an unseen stream cleaner had become a luxury they could no longer afford. So the old man left his post. High in the mountains, the springs went untended. Twigs and branches and worse muddied the liquid flow. Mud and silt compacted the creek bed. Farm waste turned parts of the stream into stagnant bogs. For a time, no one in the village noticed, but after a while, the water was not the same. It began to look brackish. The swans flew away to live elsewhere. The water no longer had a crisp scent that drew children to play by it. Some people in the town began to grow ill. All noticed the loss of sparkling beauty that used to flow between the banks of the streams that fed the town. The life of the village depended on the stream, and the life of the stream depended on the keeper. The city council reconvened, the money was found, the old man was rehired. After yet another time, the springs were cleaned, the stream was pure, children played again on its banks. Illness was replaced by health, the swans came home, and the village came back to life. The life of a village depended on the health of the stream. The stream is your soul, and you are the keeper.
It's a great parable to kind of start us out as we're starting to understand and recognize that this is a crazy time. It's great just to acknowledge it. Like this, there's nothing normal. There's nothing that we can say, hey, we've gone through this before. This is just new. It's new for everybody. So first, we just want to just acknowledge that this is a crazy time. We're getting new information daily. Sometimes it comes in waves, and it can feel overwhelming. So there's no doubt that it's going to leave its impact on us. So how we manage and walk well with what we're experiencing is going to be up to us to know how to do that. So what we're going to talk about today is our emotions and why it's important to talk about them. And just that little proverbial analogy of if we put a mask on ourselves, then we can help somebody else. But if we're so busy trying to manage all of the things that are going on all around us, it's going to be really difficult for us to help and even understand what is happening in us. We're going to be gasping. We're going to be overwhelmed. We're going to be struggling in ourselves. So here we go with just understanding it's up to us to manage ourselves. It's up for us to care for ourselves in this time. So just think through this as like an opportunity of like managing your own stream. You're the keeper of your stream. So this is your self-leadership. This is you being able to manage what's happening and what's going on in you, because that's what you have control over. So I just want you to imagine that we have all these little buckets that make up part of us. So we have our emotions, our spiritual life, our physical self, and our relational self. And so this is our opportunity to just learn to fill these buckets up so that we can learn to be a little bit healthier, hopefully, as the weeks progress here. So kind of moving on, we're just going to talk about grief, anxiety, and worry. Just a show of hands, anybody experiencing grief, anxiety, or worry? Yeah. So just any time of crisis, it's going to be emotional, and rightly so. So for many of us, even if it's just the change or the loss of what's happening in us, man, it's gonna feel dysregulating. Most of us kind of like have this thing with like, if something keeps changing, if my environment keeps changing, if my my surroundings keeps changing, that's what is commanding my thoughts. And so we want to learn how to recognize what's happening, and then we can actually maybe start handling it a little bit healthier. So what we're going to call is like the discomfort that we're feeling, the not so much like the loss of someone. Maybe that is for some of us. We are losing people that we love who are getting sick, but maybe it's more just like the loss of something that we had expected. So the difference between that kind of grief is more just like I had an expectation, it was a certain way, and that expectation is not being met. And now I have this gap of disappointment that's in between there, and that can feel like grief. So we're just going to turn the definition just a little bit in that. It's a natural part. It's natural to feel this way. Proverbs 13:12 says, hope deferred makes the heart sick, but a desire fulfilled is a tree of life. So we want to learn how to healthily grieve the loss of our routines, the loss of job, the loss of the way we used to do life, because things aren't the same. And the more and more we understand and get to the acceptance piece of it, we're going to be able to manage what's coming at us, and it's not going to make such a huge impact on our how we engage with our day. Does that make sense? I hope. It's okay. And here's the other thing too. We're Christians, and sometimes we kind of shove down that feeling of like, I don't know if I should be able to feel that. Like God's in control of everything. I can't worry. I can't have fear. I can't have anxiety. Well, I think God knows that we do have that. And he doesn't love us any less that we have that. And so I think he just wants to help us learn how to manage that better by depending on him. So we want to just acknowledge that grief is a part of the healing process, and we hope that this is actually something that helps and empowers you to navigate what comes next.
That's great. Thank you, Rachel. I couldn't agree more with you. I think sometimes Christians, we have this sort of unspoken narrative that plays through our mind, that we're always supposed to be joyful. We're always supposed to have it together. And if we don't have it together, we're supposed to know what to do really quickly to get it back together. We sort of carry with us this guilt and anxiety that we're supposed to be superhuman, and we're not. And we see that. Have you ever read a passage of scriptures? Like I've been reading Philippians recently, and these great admonitions: rejoice in the Lord always. Don't be anxious about anything, but in everything with gratitude present your request to God. Sometimes I read that and I feel so encouraged, and sometimes I read that and I feel so discouraged, because I'm like, wow, this feels really far away from me.
Yeah.
And we all have this idealized version of who we want to be. And we have to be very careful that our identity is not in the idealized version of who we want to be, because we'll never live up to that.
Yeah.
But our identity is in the fullness of who Christ is. That's where we find our being. And we find Jesus is such a, the Gospels give us such an amazing picture of his humanity and his emotions. We see the scriptures tell us that Jesus was joyful, that he looked up to heaven, that he laughed when he said, I can't believe you've chosen to reveal the kingdom to these unwise people. He was full of joy. We've seen times that he was angry, where he went into the temple and then overturned the tables. We've seen him engage in deep sorrow when he wept with Lazarus. Jesus was an emotional being. Mm-hmm. And we too are emotional people. We are mind, body, and we are heart. We are emotional beings. And some people, depending on your natural wiring, will tend to kind of ignore your emotions or suppress your emotions or deny your emotions. Some people, depending on your wiring, are kind of enslaved to your emotions. You sort of over-identify, over-inflate your emotions. We don't want to ignore them. We don't want to be enslaved by them. We want to be informed by them. Mm-hmm. Because our emotions are not who we are, but they do point deeply to what's true of us, important to us, personal to us, and we want to learn from them. And so having a practice and a discipline of just awareness and knowing what you're feeling and what it's pointing to is so important. Emotions aren't rational, so it doesn't do any good you've all heard the expression, have you ever had a $5 reaction to a 50-cent problem? You know, where emotions just come off. Do you remember, how many of you guys saw the movie Inside Out by Pixar? It's actually a remarkable little film about what goes on inside of us. You remember Anger, the red guy? And he's like, oh, he's about to blow. He's about to blow. Anger just reacts. But our emotional awareness, the hope here is not to just react to what's going on, but to notice, to be aware, so that we can respond rightly. Naming our emotions is so important. So Marcus, can we go back to the previous slide? And I want you to look, actually, that might be a little difficult to read on your screen. How many of you can make out those words? Wave your hand if you can. Okay, wave your hand if you can't make out the words. Okay, everybody can't make out the words. Listen, this is called a feelings wheel. If you've ever done anything with any kind of counselor, you've probably seen something like this. And the reason is because emotions, again, are sometimes hard to name. They're so deeply entwined with who we are that we often can't name them. And being able to look at a list of emotions, and you can do a really quick Google search of emotional wheel, emotional, a list of emotions, and it'll come up quite quickly. And you can choose a graphic that works for you. But it's such a good practice to just take some time and go, what am I feeling? This is not don't dismiss this as some new pop psychology thing. Actually, this is as old of a practice as our faith is. Saint Ignatius, who is known for the prayer of examen, every evening he would not rest until he recounted the emotions that passed through his heart that day, that he named them. Where did I feel anger? Where did I feel abandonment? Where did I feel anxiety? Where did I feel discouraged? Where was I just plain ticked off and frustrated? And then, but not just stopping there and going, what are those emotions trying to tell me? Which part of my values did that hit? Because when we can begin to talk in terms of what emotions we're feeling, then we can have a much deeper conversation. And I can tell you what, this is huge in quarantine. Because when you're up close and personal and your spouse is bound to just not do it the way you want it done after we're all climbing on top of each other anyway, instead of just talking at the problem and certainly making our spouse the problem, to be able to look at our spouse, it's such a vulnerable exercise. To say, you know what, this is not rational, or this doesn't make a ton of sense, but right now I'm feeling, and fill in the blank. I'm just feeling a little overwhelmed. And you know what, I'm feeling, if I'm honest, a little embarrassed that I feel overwhelmed, because this doesn't feel like something I should be overwhelmed about, but I do feel overwhelmed. Would you meet me here? When we talk that way, we're having a different conversation, instead of just, I don't like it when you do this, or I'm so irritated that this keeps happening. But being able to say, hey, I'm going to stop saying what you're doing and what's going on in you, and I'm just going to tell you, here's what's happening in me, and can we have a conversation of connection around these things? So any questions about what we've covered so far, or any questions about the importance of naming emotions or how to do that?
We'll have some time at the end too, if things, feel free to jot them down in, on a little notepad for yourself, if you want to come back.
And also feel free to pop them in the chat box too.
Yeah.
And we'll circle back to them at some point.
Absolutely.
Rachel?
I love what you were saying about just things are happening, and when we can label them, we then have power over them. Just not forgetting that how important it is, that giving yourself grace, even in not even understanding what might be happening in you, can actually cause more tension, because you're, I don't even know what I'm trying to say, or I don't even know what I'm feeling, can cause anxiety and stress. So just allowing yourself some grace in this process, especially as you're starting to learn this as a new skill. I love it. I mean, there's so many wheels to look at. Literally just Google feeling wheel and you'll get probably like 1,000 images. So sometimes there's like emojis or colors that might connect with you. There's also blank ones so that you can like fill in emotions that might kind of resonate with you. So like for sure, it's just a resource, but man, it is so amazing to be able to like identify what you're feeling, and then watch as it reduces power as you're taking that thought captive and bringing that to God. Just how powerful, man, it is. And to allow it too, that emotions don't come linear. Like first I felt this, and then I felt this, and then I felt this, and then emotions go like this. They kind of, I like to think of it as like a metabolization. Like your food metabolizes in your body. Well, so do emotions. And so just allowing it to kind of walk through a process, and being okay with that, man, even one day you're feeling really good, and then the next day you're feeling like someone's got to scrape me up off the floor. And just being okay with that, that process and those ebbs and flows too. Lots of grace for that. So what we're going to talk about next is what could be causing this emotion. So we're going to watch this little TED Talk, and it's a 4-minute video. And what we're going to do is just kind of watch it. It's just 4 minutes, but it's just how does stress actually affect your brain? So we're going to look at that, and then we'll jot down any questions that you might have after watching it, because I'd love to hear whatever you have to say, but we'll just watch this real quick.
Are you sleeping restlessly, feeling irritable or moody, forgetting little things, and feeling overwhelmed and isolated? Don't worry, we've all been there. You're probably just stressed out. Stress isn't always a bad thing. It can be handy for a burst of extra energy and focus, like when you're playing a competitive sport or have to speak in public. But when it's continuous, the kind most of us face day in and day out, it actually begins to change your brain. Chronic stress, like being overworked or having arguments at home, can affect brain size, its structure, and how it functions, right down to the level of your genes. Stress begins with something called the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis, a series of interactions between endocrine glands in the brain and on the kidney, which controls your body's reaction to stress. When your brain detects a stressful situation, your HPA axis is instantly activated and releases a hormone called cortisol, which primes your body for instant action. But high levels of cortisol over long periods of time wreak havoc on your brain. For example, chronic stress increases the activity level and number of neural connections in the amygdala, your brain's fear center. And as levels of cortisol rise, electric signals in your hippocampus, the part of the brain associated with learning, memories, and stress control, deteriorate. The hippocampus also inhibits the activity of the HPA axis, so when it weakens, so does your ability to control your stress. That's not all, though. Cortisol can literally cause your brain to shrink in size. Too much of it results in the loss of synaptic connections between neurons and the shrinking of your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that regulates behaviors like concentration, decision-making, judgment, and social interaction. It also leads to fewer new brain cells being made in the hippocampus. This means chronic stress might make it harder for you to learn and remember things, and also set the stage for more serious mental problems like depression and eventually Alzheimer's disease. The effects of stress may filter right down to your brain's DNA. An experiment showed that the amount of nurturing a mother rat provides its newborn baby plays a part in determining how that baby responds to stress later in life. The pups of nurturing moms turned out less sensitive to stress because their brains developed more cortisol receptors, which stick to cortisol and dampen the stress response. The pups of negligent moms had the opposite outcome, and so became more sensitive to stress throughout life. These are considered epigenetic changes, meaning that they affect which genes are expressed without directly changing the genetic code. And these changes can be reversed if the moms are swapped. But there's a surprising result. The epigenetic changes caused by one single mother rat were passed down to many generations of rats after her. In other words, the results of these actions were inheritable. It's not all bad news, though. There are many ways to reverse what cortisol does to your stressed brain. The most powerful weapons are exercise and meditation, which involves breathing deeply and being aware and focused on your surroundings. Both of these activities decrease your stress and increase the size of the hippocampus, thereby improving your memory. So don't feel defeated by the pressures of daily life. Get in control of your stress before it takes control of you.
All right, guys. I love that video. It's not, I mean, it's a little bit sciencey, but it does enable just some understanding of what's happening in our body at a physiological level, as well as, I'm getting an echo, as well as just what's happening with our actual response. And man, did you see how it lit up the kidneys too? So just knowing like our body, remember we talked about our mind, body, and soul, or mind, body, and heart, man, it's all connected. So I think there's a reason, I think there's a purpose why that is all connected. So I'd love if you have any questions about that video. Beth, you had said, what's the name of it? So just the title is on there. Okay, you good? Okay, great. Go back and watch that video. You know, there's some good stuff in there just to maybe understand different ways of how stress is actually affecting your body. So, all right, moving along.
Yes. It's so powerful to see, surely our bodies are fearfully and wonderfully made, you know, and that our body, we often tend to think of spirituality as a very different category than our physicality. But there's no way to separate the two. Our spiritual health impacts our physical health, and our physical health impacts our spiritual health. And I love that science is catching up with what the scriptures have been teaching us for thousands of years. It's really, really,
so true.
it's really, really cool. So we're talking about what takes its toll on our emotional health. Well, few things take its toll, like obviously stress and anxiety. We've named those things. But few things can take a toll on us, like self-judgment and self-condemnation can. And we hit this earlier when we were talking about sometimes the weight that we carry as Christians, and this idealized self of who we want to be, who we think we ought to be, who we wish we were, who we are so painfully aware of in moments of failure that we are not yet. And then comes in the shame, and it's debilitating. It's the first negative emotion that we see in the Bible, that when Adam and Eve broke the commands of God, and therefore breaking the covenant with God, they ran and they hid in shame, self-judgment and self-condemnation. And it's just part of the fallen nature that we've all inherited of being broken people. Just as the video was saying, we can actually hand down physical qualities to our children and their children of stress and anxiety. So spiritually, this shame and judgment and tendency to self-condemn has been handed down for us since the beginning of time. And it's never been easier in our day and age. Think about it. When your grandparents were dealing with this, they were dealing with, the old phrase, keeping up with the Joneses, maybe who's on their street. We're keeping up now with the Kardashians and everyone else in the whole planet Earth. We've got everyone's highlight reel on display for us, that we're swiping and scrolling through everyone's filtered lives, and they're showing the best and prettiest, brightest parts of who they are. And if we're not careful, it will seep into us, and it's so toxic, comparison. Mark Twain famously said, comparison is the death of joy. And that's so true. If you've ever been just like having a good day and feeling really grateful and thankful, and then you just walk past someone or scroll past someone who just has a little more than you do, or their life just looks a little better than yours do. And it's all such an illusion, because we don't have the full picture of anyone else's life. We don't have the full picture of what God is doing. It's really easy to look at someone functioning in their spiritual gift in one sector of their life and to go, wow, they've got it all together. We're looking at one part of a very complicated puzzle, and we would do well to manage and to watch and to take note. Remember, we're talking about how are we the keeper of our stream. Sometimes self-judgment and self-condemnation has flown into the stream of our soul and our spirit so frequently for so long, we don't even know it's doing it. It just flows, and we just think it's part of the scenery. And one passage that's meant a lot to me is in the reinstatement of Peter. So we know that impetuous Peter, boldly said he'd never deny Christ. Then he did. And he did it by the fire. There are two places in the Bible that mention this word, charcoal fire. It's when Peter denied Jesus, and then it's when Jesus called Peter back around the same charcoal fire. 3 times he asked him, do you love me? Do you love me? Do you love me? 3 times he denied him. It's this beautiful reinstatement of Jesus saying, Peter, I see you, and there is now in me no condemnation. Like, there's no condemnation. Come to me, Peter. So there's this beautiful rejoining of Peter and Jesus. And you know what the first thing Peter does after that? Comparison. Peter looks at Jesus and he says, what about John? And Jesus is like, what about John? Well, there's a rumor going around that John's never going to die, that he's going to live eternally. And I love this. Jesus doesn't even go there with Peter. He doesn't try to comfort him and say, oh, Peter, but I love you so much. And oh, Peter. No, he just says, Peter, what is that to you? You follow me. And those words are challenging, no doubt, but they're so life-giving. And we've got to watch ourselves when in quarantine, we're spending so much time on screens and social media, And if your if your house is anything like my house, it's not all, we're not running the tightest ship these days. You know what I'm saying? And when you get online and you see, here's the 12 activities and crafts our family made today, and we baked cookies for our neighbors, and we visited old people in the nursing home, and we dropped off, it's like, wow, well, I clearly don't have it all together,
Yeah.
And listen, we've got to watch the inclinations of our heart now more than ever. The scriptures say, guard your heart. It's the wellspring of life. If you grew up in a condemning theology, you hear that, like, that heart of yours is wicked. Watch out for it. But I believe it's better represented saying, no, your heart is a wellspring. It's a pure stream. It's the parable of the keeper of the stream. Guard it so that all this toxic stuff doesn't flow into it. Don't be looking and worrying about everyone else's field. Let them manage their field. You tend yours. You follow Jesus well.
That's awesome. Thank you, Cameron. That's awesome. So we're gonna, I'm just gonna have you guys introduce a little exercise for you to try at home, since you are at home, and chances are these are things that are happening in you. So what I'm gonna have you do, if you'll just be willing, it's volunteer, you don't have to, but if you would be willing to just close your eyes, and I want you to think back over your last couple of days. What comes to mind? How has the accuser, how has self-condemnation tried to tell you that you're doing a terrible job? And now I want you to just notice that. And I want you to invite the Lord to it. And I want you to ask him, what does he want to say to you about it? So this is just an exercise that you can do on your own. Chances are you've got some time to do that. But whenever you feel like you notice that self-judgment come in, just close your eyes and just think about what do you hear the accuser saying? What are you hearing yourself say? And then hold it, kind of recognize it. I've had people personify it. So make it something that's real. So if you want to give it a shape, give it a size, what does it look like? What does it sound like? So I want you to take that and visualize it. And then I want you to visually put self-condemnation on timeout. So we're going to take that part of ourselves. I want you to think back to the Inside Out movie with all those parts. We're going to take self-condemnation or self-judgment, and we're just literally going to personify it, and we're going to put it on timeout. Maybe it needs to go in the corner. Maybe it needs to go in the basement. Whatever you want to do, but if you want to maybe even talk to it and say, yeah, not today, Satan. Not today. You hush your mouth. I love, say that to our kids, hush your mouth, shh, you don't get to have a voice here. But we have authority over it. We have power over it. So let's talk to it, and let's start putting it in a place that actually helps us be able to manage that a little bit more and a little bit better. So just think back if you can kind of do some exercises like that with yourself, and just recognize that God is there, he is present, and he wants to talk to you so much more life-giving than self-judgment wants to kind of tear you down. So we're going to look at Matthew 6:25-27. I know you guys have seen this before, but this might be just a reminder of verses that are in the Bible about anxiety and anxiousness and worry. I find it interesting that, a lot of the verses that are in here, it says, don't be anxious about your life, what you'll eat, what you'll drink, nor about your body or what you put on it. Is life not more than food, and the body more than clothing? Look at the birds of the air. Neither they sow nor reap nor gather into barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not more valuable than they? And which of you, by being anxious, adds a single hour to his lifespan? I love that Jesus is not just trying to calm our fears about anxiety, but he's also telling us that we don't have to be, because he cares for you. He wants us to know that he is close. He wants us to know that he wants to talk to that part of us that's anxious. He wants us to know that, that we have great value to him. And, but we have to be willing to kind of trust that he wants that for us. The next verse that we're going to look at is Philippians 4:6. Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything, prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your mind in Christ Jesus. So I love that Paul mentions the commandment, don't be anxious about everything, but we're going to commit it to prayer and supplication. And not just that, but we're going to, with thanksgiving, we can give our requests, we can give our anxiety, we can give our worry to him. So he's not saying like we're not going to be anxious, but God doesn't want us sitting there wringing our hands, like as if this is going to make it any better if we get more anxious, if we take more of it on and we assume more and more. He's actually asking us to release and to give it to him. I like the idea of like almost like a dump truck. We can like literally dump it all out on him because he cares for us and he wants it and he can handle it. I love that, like in Psalms 55:22 says, cast your cares on the Lord and he will sustain you. He will never let the righteous fall. Medical doctors talk about like what anxiety does to our hearts. And just how much, we saw that video, just like it's affecting our kidneys. Well, guess what? Our kidneys are connected to our heart. So anxiety and fear and all that stuff is actually affecting our heart. So we know medically that stress and anxiety is bad for our hearts, but man, all the more so, Proverbs 12:25 says, an anxious heart weighs down a man. So we become burdened by it. It's like a part of us, that parts of us gets burdened with anxiety. It's not a weight that we were designed to carry because we don't know how to carry it well. Some anxiety, there's some stress that makes us productive, right? Like, I don't know about you, but man, if I know that I have a certain amount of time and I have a certain, time span that I have to get something done, I get a burst of energy and that helps me get something done. But then if I continuously let it sit in me and overwhelm me, then man, that anxiety starts to weigh heavy on me. And then it starts changing who I am. It starts changing how I respond. But if we can remember that, like 1 Peter 5:7 says, cast all your anxiety on him because he cares for you. God knows this and he invites us to be comforted by him. He wants us to just know that he is there, that he is present, that we're of great value to him. He's a good daddy. He's a really good daddy. And he really wants us to be able to release and dump all of this on him because he wants us to have peace. So not only are we given peace, but then we're given the ability to then guard our hearts. But first we have to have peace, because if we're so busy trying to guard our hearts, guess what's going to cause the anxiety? I got to guard my heart, I got to guard my heart, right? We want to first give it to him, give the peace or get the peace that he wants to give. And then we have the ability to guard our heart. So it's a little bit of a process. So we're going to talk a little bit about like how control is so important and how much we tend to think that we have control. I love that part. I know my name is Rachael and I believe I have control. But well, Cameron's going to kind of go through this a little bit and walk us through what this could look like.
Yeah, that's so good. I think this is such an important part of guarding the spring of our hearts and remaining and abiding in peace is knowing what we can control and what we can't control. And being able to name that and being able to make conscious choices is so important. To release what we can't control and and to work on what we can. And this really sits at the very heart of our covenantal relationship with God. When back in Deuteronomy, when God called the people of Israel to be his people, he said to them, he said, "Today I call heaven and earth as witnesses against you. I set before you life and death, blessing and curses. Choose life." So he's saying you have a choice. You can't control everything, but you have a choice of some things that are within your sphere of influence. And to the point that you're just worrying, fretting, resisting the reality that there are so many things you can't control, it will back up within you frustration, anxiety, fear, speculation, a whole host of just toxic things. This little slide is really helpful in terms of the current context that we're in. You can really take these concepts and put them within any concept of your life. But in terms of quarantine and COVID, there's some funny things on here. You know, maybe if you, the amount of toilet paper at the store and people who are hoarding it and, you know, and taking it, like we can't control that. We can't control how long it'll last. We can't control other people's emotions, there. I can only handle about 3 seconds on social media these days of the amount of people who are, you know, just spouting all of their opinions about this, that, and the other. I can't control that. Here's what I can control. Here's what I can work on. My attitude, my ability to remain in peace, my own social distancing, my own kindness and grace. And if I worry about me, that's quite enough to worry about, you know? And I was thinking about this morning, and I thought about the magnifying glass. You know, it's a really interesting metaphor because the magnifying glass is what we use when we want to see things more clearly, when we want to see things with more detail. The magnifying glass is an interesting invention because it doesn't change the size of what's being magnified. It just changed the image of how we see it. Mm-hmm. And I want to ask you, in terms of this idea of releasing what you can't control and taking control of what you can in quarantine, what are you magnifying? Because if you are looking outside of that circle of what you can control and fixating on that and over-identifying with everything that everybody else is doing and magnifying every other situation that you can't control, it will be overwhelming to you. But if you turn that inward and you name, and I would encourage you to name very concretely, not abstractly, but very concretely, here are some very specific things that I need to focus on or magnify over the next coming days. And I'm going to work on making these things larger in my life than these outer things that I can't control anyway. And, you know, Paul wrote to Timothy, and he said these powerful words: God has not given you a spirit of fear or anxiety. He's given you a spirit of power and of love and a sound mind. Yeah. That is what he's given you. Maybe you've heard of the name of Viktor Frankl, is a very famous author and psychologist, and he came through the Holocaust. And he's very well known for a type of therapy called logotherapy. And to dumb it down very simply, it basically is this. He got through the Jewish concentration camps where thousands of his peers and family members died and perished out of loss of hope. He said, essentially, the one thing that pulled him through was this paradigm: I will focus on the things that I can control. That is my inner peace, my inner joy. I will be grateful and with gratitude even in the midst of a living hell. He said he felt his soul could prosper.
Yeah, it's great. If you're interested in reading that book, it's called A Man's Search for Meaning. It is phenomenal. It's the first half of the book is just his experiences in the concentration camp, but then the last half of it is more about like his theory and what he took from it. Amazing book, just beautiful. beautifully written, very real, very real. But great example. So kind of looking again, remember we're looking at what buckets are we filling up? Not necessarily to pull away from the the stream analogy, but definitely like we have all of these things that make us who we are. So we have our spiritual, our physical, and our relational care, and just understanding that all of this is connected and interconnectedness in between all of them. So like Cameron said, when one is out of whack or one is out of sorts or is empty, it's going to affect these other places. So what do we do with that? We're going to look at just like an image again of what it will look like to do some different kinds of coping things. So when we're looking at this, if you see this like nice little diagram, obviously, in the middle, we have just the feeling of loss of control. And so we're identifying our feelings, and we have disappointment, shock, fear, isolation, anxiety. And the very natural thing that comes up are what we negatively go to. So we have our negative coping mechanisms that can kind of turn us out of whack a little bit. But then if we kind of go one tier more, and I don't know, it got kind of fuzzy, but one tier more, it really works into like, what are the active coping? What are the things that I actually have control over? What are the things that I can actually engage with? So if it's setting priorities, problem solving, finding humor, paying attention to my feelings, asking for help, do expressive writing. So with that, I want to just share a little exercise thinking through this. And by the way, and I really just want to focus too, there might already have been some pretty negative coping mechanisms before COVID. So the fact that like, things are amplified right now, it's really probably not a big surprise. But there might have already been some stress in, parenting, stress in finances, stress with our jobs, stress with our relationship with our spouse, loneliness, all that kind of stuff, addiction, that has probably already, but this is, what that looks like now is that all those active coping mechanisms weren't being utilized before. So it just feels like it's just a thinner and thinner thread that you're operating out of. So what we're trying to do is like, okay, so we understand that this is all there, but maybe we need to do some grieving and mourning of things that were, so that we can start activating some healthy coping. Okay. So here's the exercise. You're going to take a sheet of paper and you're literally going to slice it down the middle. So you have two columns. Okay. On one side of the sheet, you're going to bullet current stressors in one column and current coping resources in the other column. Okay. And if it helps, maybe write out the coping resources that you were using prior to Corona. And if they're not something that that is effective now, just slice a line right through that. And maybe it's just helpful to see. So like, what if it's like hanging out with friends, or having that like social connection. And if that was something that was really important and really good, but you can't do that right now in the context that you did, maybe it's just adjusting what that looks like. So if it's doing a Zoom call or meeting each other, for walks 6 feet apart, whatever it is, but it's just finding a new way of managing that. So going through that, and then just validating those losses, giving yourself a grade from 0 to 10 and how you're currently doing. Get a chance to say things like, yeah, I'm just surviving. I actually just want to go to bed at a decent time. Rock on, like we're just going to celebrate those new active, healthy coping mechanisms. And then maybe kind of grade yourself. What do you actually want to do? What is realistic for you to actually engage in? And then maybe just taking a few minutes to just evaluate, what would you like to be able to start doing? What would be helpful? Just again, looking at, there's lots of ways that you can start doing some active, healthy coping mechanisms, but just understanding we've got to grieve the things that we can't do in order to be able to look at and be refreshed in the things that we can do. Okay. The last slide that we're looking at here, is, so this is kind of the creme de la creme. Like, how do we put this all together, right? So this is what we can do. First, we can label those emotions. So we're going to get that feeling wheel out. We're going to start identifying, what am I actually feeling? Where am I feeling it in my body? Is there a place that actually we want to invite the Lord into that space? Second, we want to confess. We want to, the image of the dump truck, we want to dump it out. We want to let it go. We want to give that back to the Lord, because he cares for you and he wants all of that. We also want to identify some of those negative coping strategies. This, again, we want to be really sure that, it's easy to find things to help us cope. And that could be, we're all of a sudden compulsive shopping online. We're looking at alcohol consumption. Man, this is, I think I saw the recent stat that alcohol consumption or price purchases has like gone off the roof. So there's a lot of alcohol that's being, maybe if that's something that's you're struggling with, maybe that's something that we need to take off as what was a coping and look for something healthier. So replacing it with like a walk or something. But also just being careful about like pornography use, just the ease access, because we're on media, and man, wouldn't it be easy to just slip into one of those rooms and start chatting with people that we probably don't need to be chatting with, or if it's looking at images, that might harm us more than help us. So Philippians 4:7-9 says, think on these things, and the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. So remember, we want to look at whatever's good, whatever's right, whatever's pure, whatever's lovely, whatever's admirable. And that's what's going to bring us that peace. And then the last thing on the list is work on self-care. So what does self-care look like? It's looking at what is something that we can do to take care of one's being, happiness, especially during periods of stress. How are we taking care of our soul? So that could look like meditation, breathing exercises. There's an app called Calm, and you can get on there, and there's tons of self or guided breathing exercises or meditation. There's lots of healthier ways of helping your body regulate. I saw a new one. Well, it's not new, but I saw where like they were teaching kids how to blow bubbles. Remember doing that as a kid? Blowing, with the little bubble thing, right? So we're breathing out and we're getting, some fun things to happen. But what that's doing is it's regulating your body, getting oxygen to your brain and blood to your brain so that you're actually going to manage your stress better. Okay. So looking at self-care, man, I put on the back of this PowerPoint just a bunch of resources on, and some reading material to look at the importance of touch and how important that actually is to the body, and how that actually helps the body regulate. So if you're not touching anybody, probably your stress response is going to be pretty high. So actually what it does to actually hug, and how that increases oxytocin, which actually decreases the stress cortisone level. So it's pretty amazing how God has built that into our bodies to want and need touch. There's also, there's a program called Levity. This is just kind of wrapping this up, but it's light exercise and vitamin intervention therapy. So it's looking at 20 minutes of sunshine, 20 minutes of exercise, so either running or walking, and then looking at your vitamin levels. So maybe that's, looking at your vitamin B12 or B12 or D3. Man, those are things that really can help elevate our mood naturally, and you're not taking an antidepressant or an anti-anxiety medication. We're doing stuff that God's given us already that we can do. We might not be getting it from our food, but man, we can do it just through caring for our heart and caring for our bodies through that way. Maybe it would be a great idea to see a counselor. So just know there's lots of counselors out there that do telemental health. So you don't even have to go in. You can do this kind of via one-to-one this way too. So in short, be kind to yourself. It's a crazy time. It's going to take some time to learn what's happening negatively in you, and then learn some healthier ways of managing and coping for a future. And hopefully they'll bless you. So Any questions? Sorry, breeze through that back part really fast. No. Oh, that's a great question. So Beth said, I've felt at peace with very little stress, but now I'm wondering if it's actually denial. That's a great question, Beth. Yeah. What do you, well, I mean, I don't want to get all psychoanalyzed in that, but there might be just something where you do a little processing with that. Is there something that you're putting in place to kind of help you cope? Is like a healthy cope, or is it, don't answer now, but maybe that's just a question for you to start processing through. Are you putting something to cover it so that you don't feel stressed, or is it something that you're actually allowing the stress to happen or the emotion to happen and you're just managing it better? So that might be just a question to kind of process through. Yep, so resources will be at the end of the PowerPoint. So you guys, we're gonna post this on our website and you'll have access to the PowerPoint and the webinar again in the future. Anything else? Kind of breeze through the back end of that, but feel free to, if you have any questions, feel free to email me to Rachael@gfc.tv. Would love to resource you with whatever, even if it's looking at counselors that you could potentially get connected to, or even just some reading. And again, if you want some heavy reading, check out Dark Night of the Soul. It's not a light read. But anything you want to say, Cameron, to kind of wrap this up?
No, I think this is this topic is so incredibly important and can't go underestimated in terms of its importance of just spiritual formation.
Yeah.
Yes, reach out, get the help you need. We do for our plumbing, we do for our house stuff, we do for all practical things, and we think somehow when it comes to like emotion, our emotions, our mental health, how we're dealing with things, we're supposed to just have it all together. And I think that's a real tactic of the enemy that keeps us isolated and internal. And sometimes it is as simple as just, bringing it out in the light with someone that you trust. And, it brings such breakthrough. So.
Yeah. Agreed. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Suffer alone. Definitely not a good coping.
Yeah, true.
All right, guys. Well, we'll pray you out, and then you guys will be on your way. So, Lord, thank you for just today. Just thank you for this opportunity to just talk with people about things that you have given us to help us express ourselves. Lord, I ask that you would help us be brave to actually want to deal with what's happening within us, and help us to want to come to you, but not only come to you, but find trusted people that we can come to as well. Lord, I ask that we would thrive during this time. Help us to be people that are blessed and can be blessings to others. But Lord, we know that we have to do the work on ourselves first. So I pray that you would help us tend to our streams. I pray that you would help us recognize when there's debris and a stench and just things that are in there that can be cleaned and can be restored and can be brought renewed through you. So we just ask that you would help us to be able to do that well. I ask these things in your precious and holy name. Amen.
Amen.
Love you guys.